What is a curious writer? To not sound ambiguous, a curious writer is a writer who's curious. I know that sounds a little obvious and also understated, but it's important to understand that a writer will have difficulty in being a writer without first being curious. Here's a textbook explanation for curiosity. It is the desire to learn or know more about something or someone. So, therefore, a curious writer is one that desires to learn or know more about something or someone. Ever known a person who just wasn't curious about anything? You know the type. You ask them the time and they never know. You ask them if they can keep a secret and they're not even curious to know what that secret is. They're also the kind that might attend a gender reveal party but then leave before the gender is revealed. Imagine having to read a story written by someone like that. It's hard to imagine because this type of person will never write a story, at least not one that anyone would enjoy reading. Here's a riddle for you. A woman is sitting in her hotel room and hears a knock at the door. She opens the door to see a man whom she's never met before standing there. He says, "I'm sorry, I have made a mistake. I thought this was my room." He then goes down the corridor and into the elevator. The woman goes back into her room and calls security. Today, I'll talk about why a writer needs to be of a curious nature, and then at the end of this video, I'll tell you what made the woman so suspicious of the man. You see, you just can't be an effective writer if you're not curious enough to create an interesting story. And that's because you won't feel the need to ask yourself that all important question: what if? What if the man convicted of the slaughter of his family was set up? What if the young man who became the star pitcher for the Yankees is discovered to be a woman? What if a commercial plane carrying 347 passengers that went missing over 20 years ago is suddenly found intact? When writing situations for your characters to live through, otherwise known as your plot, they must be curious or they become stagnant, which means you, the writer, must first be curious or your characters will never have need to travel outside of the line that takes them from the beginning of your story to the end. If you have been following my videos, you know that I like to use example stories to further my point, and this video is no different. Today I have a little tale about twin boys. One is named Thomas and the other is named George. One afternoon, their mother sends Thomas over to Old Man Rumford's pharmacy to pick up her prescription. It's about a 10-minute walk through the park, but a full 20-minute walk if one keeps to the sidewalks. Thomas doubts he can traverse the many dips and turns of the park while playing on his iPad, so he decides on the longer route through the neighborhood streets. Having walked that same route to school each day, he is able to navigate his way with only the need to periodically look up to cross the street and sidestep a mailbox or two. He is so enthralled in his game, nothing around him on his way is able to sway him away from it. Even the neighborhood cat doesn't warrant more than a quick glance from the uninquisitive child. Once he arrives at the pharmacy, he realizes there isn't anyone at the counter. So he decides to sit and continue playing while he waits for Old Man Rumford to appear. It isn't until the battery from his iPad dies that he finally looks up and realizes that he has been waiting over an hour. Only then does he call out and is soon met by Old Man Rumford, who hands Thomas the prescription that had been on the counter, bagged and awaiting his arrival the entire time. Thomas races home, this time cutting through the park. He is in a hurry to get to his room to charge his iPad to continue his game. A month later, their mother's prescription needed retrieving again, but this time she sends George. She was hesitant at first because he could never go on an errand without turning it into an adventure. However, after the length of time that his brother Thomas took, she was confident that George would arrive back home quicker. George, as one would imagine, took the route of the park. Not because it was faster, but because he could find little adventure walking along the sidewalk, and George was all about the adventure. It was the neighborhood cat, the very one he had tried to capture on several occasions, that first caught his attention. The cat, recognizing him, immediately takes off running. It decides to run along the path through the park with George in hot pursuit. They do this for some time until at some point, when it is evident that George is gaining, the cat veers off the path through an opening in the fence that separates the park from a row of houses. George follows, curious to know where that opening will lead. On the other side, the cat is nowhere to be seen, but George discovers, to his delight, he is standing in the backyard of Old Man Rumford's house. You see, Old Man Rumford's pharmacy is attached to the front of his house, so whenever he wasn't dealing with a customer, he was somewhere in his home. Since this is the very place George was heading to anyway, and since his curiosity to see what a pharmacist's house looks like has gotten the better of him, he strolls in through the back door. Inside, he walks along a hallway that he assumes will lead him toward the front of the house, where he expects to find Old Man Rumford behind the counter of his pharmacy. Along the way, he passes several rooms which he can't help but to peek into. It's in one of these rooms that he finally finds Old Man Rumford fast asleep in an easy chair in front of his TV. He is just about to go in and wake him when he happens to glance across the hall into another room and sees a strange-looking chest. His curiosity getting the better of him, he goes into that room and opens the chest to see what it holds. It is filled with many things, most of them quite old and covered in dust. But there is one object that grabs his attention. It is off to one side and free of any dust, as if it had been cleaned recently. It's a map. Opening it, he realizes it's of Old Man Rumford's house, and somewhere in the basement is where the map shows hidden treasure. Hearing the continued sound of snoring, which tells him Old Man Rumford is still sleeping, with the map as his guide, he makes his way down the stairs at the end of the hallway and heads for the room where the map indicates the location of the treasure. A shovel and a pick are lying on the floor in front of a large hole dug into a wall in the very back of the room. Peering inside, George is able to see what looks to be a doorway. With his curiosity growing, he steps through the doorway to see where it will lead. He arrives on the other side, but almost falls over in surprise when he realizes he has been transported to a faraway place, a place where the people don't look anything like anyone he has ever seen before. His curiosity is beckoning him to find out more about this strange place, but he remembers that his mother is waiting for him to return with her prescription, and so he decides to return to the hole in the wall some other day when he has more time. Back upstairs, he carefully places the map back into the chest, closes back the lid, and then heads to the pharmacy. He sees his mother's prescription sitting on the counter, and after grabbing it, runs off home. As he hands the package to his mother, while his brother, Thomas, sits in a chair playing on his iPad, he runs up to his room to plan what he'll do when he gets back to Old Man Rumford's basement. Now, here we have two stories with two different characters. The fact that they are twins means absolutely nothing. The important thing is that one is curious and one isn't. Their mother first sent out Thomas, the one who hasn't a curious bone in his body. Many interesting stories can develop from simply sending your character from point A to point B. But the trick is they can't just go from point A to point B. They need to veer off the straight and narrow and branch off onto different tangents that help to create wonder and excitement for your reader. Simply doing exactly what he set out to do and then returning without stepping outside of those set parameters isn't in any way an interesting story, because a story needs, firstly, a character whose curiosity will take the story to a different level. And since your characters are merely extensions of yourself, if you're not curious, then they won't be. George, on the other hand, is very much curious. He was sent out on the same errand, but because of his curious nature, was unable to just go from point A to point B without investigating anything able to draw his attention along the way. Keep in mind, there is always, no matter how mundane our day, adventure around every corner. With George, it started with his decision to go through the park as opposed to walking along the boring sidewalk. There, he ran into his old nemesis, the cat. Soon after, the chase began, which brought him to the rear of Old Man Rumford's house, and because of his curious nature, not only took him inside the house, but eventually to the room that held the chest. If his brother Thomas had somehow been inclined to make it to that room, it is doubtful that he would have even opened the chest. But George's curiosity wouldn't allow him to not open it, and as a result, he found the map and subsequently the doorway. And also because of his curious nature, he vowed to return to explore this new discovery. Remember, it is during the creation of your story where you find the greatest need for that important question, what if? What if Thomas had forgotten to take his iPad to Old Man Rumford's pharmacy? What if George never chased the cat through the park? What if George didn't arrive while Old Man Rumford was sleeping? It is your character's curiosity, or lack thereof, that defines them. Either they will take your story to places interesting enough to take your reader along with them, or they will do nothing out of the ordinary and lose any potential readers you may have accumulated. And I'll say it again because I believe it's worth repeating. Your characters are a direct extension of you. It's important to remember they do what you have it in you to do. So, whether or not you're of a curious nature will directly determine how well your characters will do in any given situation. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it won't kill the writer. Now, while pondering the question whether or not you're a curious writer, ask yourself this question: am I a curious George, or am I simply a doubting Thomas? And here is the answer to the riddle if you haven't already figured it out. If the man knocking at the woman's hotel room door really thought it was his hotel room, he would have tried to open the door instead of knocking on it first. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.